So last week we talked about the growth and development of plants. We talked about the different hormones that are involved in plants. Okay? The auxins, the cytokinins, the gibberellins, ethylene, okay, salicylic acid. And certainly we need to know those things. Okay? There could definitely be multiple choice, numerical response, and maybe even a written response item, okay, that asks you about those things. Today, we need to continue on with growth and development and talk about tropisms. We introduced those a little bit last week. Okay, we talked about, phototropism, the growth towards light, geotropism, the growth in response to gravity, okay, and thigmotropism, the growth response to touch. What we're going to go is go over those in detail today, as well as the mechanism by which all three happen. Okay, so here's the good news. All three tropisms are accomplished the same way. It's what triggers them that's different. Okay? So if I gave you a 5-mark question where I put a picture of a weirdly shaped tree, okay, and asked you, what is going on with this tree? Okay, 3 out of the 5 marks would be for explaining how any tropism happens. And it wouldn't matter which one. You could pick the wrong one and still get 3 out of 5 for telling me the mechanism by which all tropisms occur. Okay? Only 2 marks would be for it's geotropism. That's a growth response to gravity. And the other 3 marks would be here's how a tropism happens. And it would be the same no matter which one is going on. Okay? Okay, so first off, okay, tropism is a growth response that results in curvatures, okay, of whole plant organs toward or away from stimuli. Okay, positive would be towards, negative would be away. Okay, so that's the definition of a tropism. Okay, now, I just said a minute ago, the thing that's common to all of them is the mechanism by which they happen. Okay, so the way a plant does this, whether that's because of gravity or because of touch or because of light, okay, the way it does that is a differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides of the organ. Okay? One side grows faster than the other. Okay, this is my very bad drawing of a running track. Okay? Now, plants make themselves curve by making one side of the plant grow faster than the other. Okay? That is going to result in one side pushing on the other because it's growing faster. Very much like if, for example, you were out back here on our track, okay, and you and your friend are running against each other. But you start on the start-finish line. One of you is in lane 1 and one of you is in lane 3. Who has to run faster? Why does lane 3 have to run faster? They have to go further. Okay? If you've ever run in track and field, okay, when you have to run a race that involves a corner, there's stagger lines. Okay? Lane 1 starts here, way at the back. They start behind everybody else. Lane 2 starts up here, and lane 3 starts up there to account for the fact that if you're in lane 3, it's further to go all the way around the track. Radius of a circle, right? Okay? So, for a plant, if it's going to cause part of it to bend, one part has to be growing slower than another to force it to go that way. Okay, so that's the mechanism for making that bend, is one side grows faster than the other. Okay, so that would be like one mark for the mechanism. Now, here's the rest of it. Which plant hormone do you suppose would be most involved, from what we learned on Friday, in trying to make cells on one side grow longer than the others? Auxins. Okay, so the mechanism for a tropism is differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides of the plant. Okay, by secreting auxins to that side in higher amounts. Okay, because auxins make cells grow longer. So if the outside of that curve is getting more auxins, it is going to make the cells on that side grow faster and longer than the ones on the inside. And that will naturally create a torque, okay? A force that turns or bends something. That's what torque is, okay? And it'll torque the plant in that direction, okay? It essentially creates tension. Okay? And then over time, if it's a tree, that curve can become lignified and solid. Okay, so this plant here, okay, we're using geotropism, okay, the growth response to gravity, to cause it to curve. So if you tip over a plant, okay, it'll start to grow back up again. Negative geotropism. It's growing away from the pull of gravity. Growing up generally gets you to the light. What if a plant was forced to choose? What if I put a plant on a table that was like lit? Okay? So the light source is actually below the plant. Is the plant going to grow up, or is it going to curve and grow down? If it's got to choose, what's it going to choose? Growth response to gravity or growth toward food? Food, yeah. It's going to starve if it doesn't grow towards the light. Okay? That's how you would get something like this plant here on the right. Okay? Or you make it upside down. Okay? They're saying in that one that they just put it upside down. It started to grow back up again because the light would have been above, okay, and gravity would have told it to go that way. But if I set this right side up on a table that was the light source, it would do this as well. Okay? So here's how I ask a tropism question on a test. I show you a picture of a plant like these, and I give you a blurb about what's going on for that plant. Okay? So if I just say that first plant was laid on its side and over time it grew to have this shape, what's going on? Well, then you would explain to me geotropism as a growth response to gravity, okay, and the plant would naturally want to grow upwards, okay, in order to balance itself. This is accomplished by making cells on one side grow faster than the other, by secreting auxins to that side, resulting in the cells on that side getting longer and chirping the plant. 5 out of 5. Okay? If I gave you this situation, the plant is set on a table, the light source is below, the plant grows like this. Okay, it grows downwards towards the light. Oh, well, that's phototropism. It's a growth response to light. The plant is growing towards its food. That's accomplished by making one side of the plant grow faster than the other, by secreting auxins to that side, making the cells on that side grow faster and longer, bending the plant. Okay, those 3 marks the same no matter which? Absolutely. Okay, that's an application question. Do you have to memorize how a tropism works? Do you have to memorize what the tropisms are? But then apply them to a situation, okay? All right, so geotropism, okay? Caused by gravity, seen in trees that can grow on steep hillsides, or in a situation like that flood one we looked at, okay? They got pushed over when they were young and partially buried, okay? They grew back up and balanced themselves. Okay, if you go out for a hike in Kananaskis, you'll see probably a half a dozen trees that are showing some sort of tropism bend in them. Okay, it's actually quite common, especially in the mountains where trees can get knocked over, right? Avalanche or rock slide or something pushes a tree and then it goes straight back up after. Okay, so it can bend it. All right, so you can actually see that in these trees here. They're all bent like this, probably got pushed over at some point and started growing back up. Because if this tree was to continue growing outwards like this, it would uproot itself, right? You'd have all that weight way out here pulling on the roots and it would tip it over. Okay? Growing back up over the roots balances itself. Now, weirdest one I ever saw, first time I saw it actually, okay, I worked at a golf course through high school and university, and we had a spruce tree, I kid you not, looked like these ones. Like, it was cartoonish, but I kid you not, that's what it looked like. Growing right next to this tree was a rose bush. Okay. Which grows faster, a spruce tree or a rose bush? The rose bush, yeah. Rose bushes grow way faster than spruce trees. Spruce trees are actually quite slow, okay? Well, what happened with this tree was the tree and the rose bush probably germinated around the same time, okay? So for plants, they were born at the same time, okay? Well, the rose bush would have shaded out the spruce tree, so it grew towards the light. Okay, it used phototropism to get back out into the light. And then it couldn't keep growing out this way or it would fall over. So it showed geotropism and grew right back over its roots, okay, and then grew upwards, shading out the rose bush. Okay, but it got, I kid you not, like that wow in it, okay, as a result of that. Right? You see it on riverbanks lots of times, trees will fall over and then they'll start growing straight back up again. Okay? Lots of places in nature. If you went and just walked the path system along the river here, you'd probably see a half a dozen. Okay? It's very, very common. Okay, so what do we need to know? Geotropism is caused by gravity. Okay? Plants have a sense of up and down. Okay, phototropism caused by location of light sources. So a plant grows towards the light. Okay, diagram here on the left is showing what we were talking about, that mechanism. Okay, if the light is over here, so you can see in the second picture, the light's on this side, more auxin will be secreted to the shaded side, and it will result in those cells. You can see all the cells in this picture are the same size, but in this picture, all the cells on the other side, on this side here where my marker is, are longer, because the auxin is making that side elongate and push the plant towards the light. Okay, so that can result in curvatures, okay, like this. Right, you could actually make a maze and a plant would grow its way out of it. okay? Because you could tell where the light was. It would actually grow towards it around the corners, okay? But more often than not, what you see with plants is they'll only grow leaves where the light is, okay? I mean, case in point, right? The plants that we have in this classroom, okay? They generally grow leaves on the side where the sun is, okay? You can actually see that in this picture here on the right. So this tree is growing out of the rock, not a matter of being tipped over. That's the way it's growing. It must be anchored well enough that it doesn't need to grow in response to gravity. It's growing outwards. Where are all the leaves? Top or bottom? Top. Why grow leaves under here? Why grow branches off of here? They're going to be shaded. Grow them on the top. You see this on trees that fall over a lot. They'll grow branches on the top. Okay? If they get leaned over, branches will only grow on the top. Okay? There used to be one over where the new traffic circle is. Okay? There was a tree there that was knocked over, and it had been knocked over for so long and no one had ever cut it, okay, that it was actually only growing branches on the top part of the trunk. The tree survived being knocked over. It was just growing branches on the top. Okay? That sort of makes sense? So if you're looking at that situation, I show you a picture like this, okay, and you see a pattern of foliage, okay, where the light is, that's not geotropism then, is it? Okay, I don't see a big bend, I don't see something growing to balance itself, but I do see it putting photosynthetic tissue where the sun is. Okay, that's the analysis part that has to go on, right? Yes, you can memorize phototropism, geotropism, and how they happen, but being able to recognize which one, that's the analysis part. Okay? Okay, and then thigmotropism. Okay, thigmotropism is stimulated by touch, right? In plants that have vines, you can see it really clearly. They make tendrils, okay? These little coily things that'll wrap around fences or other trees, okay? Like a strangler fig, okay, can wrap around like that. It's actually parasitic, okay? Things like that. They'll just wrap these tendrils around and use it to support themselves. Okay? To make a coil like that still involves having to make one side grow faster than the other. That's how you make the turn. Okay, so thigmotropism stimulated by touch. Okay, and they will coil around it. Now, that's one form. That's positive thigmotropism because they're growing around the object. In our neck of the woods, we see negative thigmotropism a lot. And that touch is wind. Okay? Wind is nasty. Okay? If you are a tree and you grow in a completely exposed location, wind can break your branches right off. So you need to grow in a way that will preserve as much of your growth and photosynthetic material as possible. Okay? So, two examples here. One is actually in Newfoundland on the coast, and this one is just down by the Crow's Nest River. Okay, so very southern Alberta. Okay, so in this one here, okay, the ocean is over here on the left. The wind always blows in off the ocean, and in the wintertime, that is an icy wind. Okay? It is carrying, ice crystals. Like, if you've ever been in an ice storm, like a bad blizzard, you can sometimes feel that stuff, and it's abrasive. It's almost like being in a sandblaster. Okay? And you can feel it hitting your skin. Well, imagine you're a tree, because what we would do if it's hitting our skin is we would just cover up and go away, because we're animals and we can do that. Okay? This tree is stuck there. Okay? So those icy winds come in and they blow against this side of the tree. Well, it's not going to bother growing any branches on that side. They're just going to get broken off, beat up, okay, and not be useful to it. So it's only grown branches on the leeward side. Okay? Essentially, what that tree has done is used its trunk as a windbreak. Okay? It's like standing behind, like if you had a big pillar and it was really windy and you hide behind the pillar, right? You're sheltered from the wind as long as you don't go out of that cone of protection that it provides. Okay? So this tree would only grow branches inside of that area. Okay? This one here okay? This is actually two different trees. This is the pine tree here. You can see that it's got a lot of branches on the other side, wind, okay? So that's east, and the wind comes this way, west to east. This is a spruce tree. Does it look like a spruce tree? Okay. It's a white spruce, but it's growing along the ground because that faces directly west, and the wind always comes in, blows right up the river valley, okay, against that side, that whole mountainside. You can actually see all the trees, look at them all. They're all kind of bent to the east, okay? They don't have as much branches on their west sides, okay? They all are doing that because that's the uncomfortable windy side. Okay? In mountain passes, you'll even see them grow, they actually have a name for it. It's called crummels. And if you've ever gone hiking kind of in above the tree or close to the tree line, you'll see them. So a spruce tree that's bent right back on itself. And it only grows branches inside the arch. Okay? What this does is it allows it to become a snow fence in the wintertime. So when wind hits this, it slows down. Okay? And any snow that wind is carrying, okay, instead of traveling at a high speed in the wind, hits the trunk and falls in and collects and makes a drift that buries the tree. Okay? Not a big deal. The tree's not carrying out any photosynthesis. It's wintertime. But being in a snowdrift protects it. If you're skiing, that's a widowmaker. Okay? You get a ski or a board underneath that, and you got a broken leg. Okay? But you don't see them coming because they're just a snowdrift. You don't even know there's a tree under there. Okay? But it's completely protected, and it's simply grown that way because of the unpleasant, icy touch of high wind. Okay? Making sense? Mother Nature does some weird things. Okay? Thigmotropism is probably one of the biggest ones. All right. Questions on thigmotropism? All right, I would like you guys to take a few minutes and answer those questions, okay? Thinking about the first part of this lesson, which was Friday, okay? And then the rest of it today, the tropism stuff today. Okay, give you a few minutes on that. Okay, so for the first one, why is it that two identical plants, even if they're genetically identical, grown from a cutting of the same plant, may grow up to look entirely different? What's not pre-programmed in their genes? Their final shape is not pre-programmed. It is the result of an interaction between their genetics and the environment in which they live. Okay? They must adapt to their environment, like that plant and that plant do. Okay? The environment of that plant is some mean guy torments it and turns it 90 degrees every time he waters it, whereas this one just gets left to grow as it will. Okay? They have a response to their environment. Are they genetically identical? No, but they're close enough. They're the same species. Okay? All right, number 2, any growth pattern in plants is referred to as starts with T, tropism. Okay, number 3, do plants in the tropical rainforest require very much abscisic acid? Why? Here's an application question. Okay.
Abscisic acid is like the one that makes them go dormant, and the rainforest like doesn't change environments that much, so they don't really need to go dormant.
Exactly. Okay? If you're always getting the same amount of sun and the same amount of darkness, there's nothing to even trigger the production of abscisic acid. If you grow in the tropical rainforest and you go dormant, you might as well be dead. Everything else is going to overgrow you, okay, while you're asleep. So there is no need for a tropical plant, unless it was maybe in a tropical desert, okay, or maybe even like the savanna, where there could be significant dry and wet seasons, okay. Mostly it's going to be that they wouldn't use it at all because their length of day, which is the primary trigger for producing it, doesn't change. Okay? All right. Number 4, long exposure to 2,4-D, that's Agent Orange, okay, has been shown to produce cancerous tumors in humans. Why might this happen? Well, it's an auxin, and auxins trigger rapid cell growth. Not division per se, but rapid cell growth. In humans, it has a different effect. It actually can cause not only rapid cell growth, but also cell division. Okay? We're not a plant, so it has a slightly different effect on us. Okay? And then number 5, this hormone is involved in the ripening of fruit. Ethylene, right. Okay, so certainly there'd be some recall questions on a unit exam, multiple choice question, or a picture and a multiple choice, but then also some application. Okay, here's a picture, here's a blurb about it. Okay, what can you apply to this situation? Okay. Now, real quickly here, we're going to talk about factors affecting plant growth. Okay, we talked about this briefly already, but we're just going to kind of quickly go through it. Big thing here, guys, is factors that affect plant growth can be grouped into 2 categories. Abiotic factors. Okay, these are non-living factors. Okay, and then there would be biotic factors. Okay, those would be living factors. Okay. All right, so if you're, grass growing on the prairies, what would a biotic factor that might affect your growth be? An animal eating you. That would be your primary biotic factor concern, okay? Especially if this is, back when our environment around here was in its natural state and a herd of 10,000 bison was going by, okay? I mean, nothing does a better job of mowing the lawn like 10,000 bison do, okay? You could literally play golf behind them, okay? They'll cut everything right down to the ground. So that would be a biotic factor. Could insects be a biotic factor? Right? Pests of some kind, grasshoppers, okay, something like that, a horde of locusts, okay, could be pretty biblical if you were a plant, okay. What about fungus? Right, especially if it was parasitic, right, it could certainly, like fairy ring, okay, you get those growing in your yard or in the park, right? That could certainly be a biotic factor. It's a living organism, okay, the theme here is if it's alive and it can affect your growth, it's a biotic factor. Okay. Abiotic factors, those are the non-living things. Okay. They're conditions more than they are like something tangible. All right, so if we're looking at this picture here, okay, what would be some abiotic factors in this environment that could affect the growth of a plant? The rain, yeah, it needs moisture. Okay, the only place it's getting it from is from the sky, so yeah, definitely rain. The rocks. Okay, so the rocks are what give minerals to the soil, so they would be important. Okay, what else? The sun, yeah, how much sun do you get? Okay, and especially around here, not only does the duration of sunlight change, but its intensity changes as well. Okay? Right now, we're coming into the part of the year where not only do we get the least hours of daylight, but we get the least intense daylight as well, because it's so low on the horizon instead of directly overhead. Okay. Anything else? What about the air? 2 things about the air that could affect the growth of a plant. Its temperature and wind, yeah, can certainly affect the growth of the plant. Wasn't thinking of it. Okay, 3 things. That's a good one. The amount of carbon dioxide in it. Okay, I mean, if there's a lot of carbon dioxide, that's a lot of food. Okay, and plants are using that to make glucose. The more of it they have, the more glucose they can make. Okay, so temperature. Okay, that's a big one. Nothing goes on if water is frozen. Plants cannot transport ice through their xylem. Okay, it's also not really going to evaporate out of the stomates and the spongy layer if it's frozen. Okay, so temperature is a big part of that because plants are not like us. They can't maintain a body temperature. Their metabolism doesn't work that way. And similarly, high temperatures are not good either. Plants can get stroked just like we can. Okay, they can get heat stroke just like you can. If they're losing way too much water in a day, they can get wilty in the matter of hours, just like you can get wilty if you're out there without any water for too long. Right? Anybody ever get heat stroke before? Yeah, it's highly unpleasant. Okay. Wicked headache. Okay, and then water. Obviously, plants need water, and its availability changes from not only location to location, but even from day to day or even hour to hour, okay, depending on other conditions. Okay, so in this picture, right, we've got, you know, obviously a creek flowing through there. It looks like it's a kind of a cloudy day, but we have forest in here, but it's like, you know, high latitude forest because this is actually up by Hinton. Okay, so do we see a lot of any like tropical looking plants here? Okay, because the temperature is not right for that. Okay, believe it or not, even though there's a forest there, that's a dry forest. Okay, pine forests and spruce forests tend to be in places where water is a bit more scarce. Okay, in these kind of forests, water is scarce because most of the year it's snow, and it melts and runs off before the ground thaws, and it doesn't get absorbed. So they're growing in dry soil a lot. Okay. Okay, sunlight. Now, we got to talk a bit about sunlight because it's not just a source of energy, okay? It actually can do other things. We've already talked about how the amount of it can trigger the production of abscisic acid if you're in a place where the duration of sunlight changes. Okay? But duration of light can also trigger other things: flowering, fruit production. Length of day also can affect the mating cycles of the animals that might eat you. Okay, like right now is the mating season for deer. Speaking of which, steer clear of them right now, especially that like there's like 3 or 4 in town with the big bucks, and they got like a big rack. I watched one yesterday behind my house, like beat the hell out of a younger buck. Okay, that young buck was way out of that one's weight class. I don't know what he was thinking. Okay, you don't want to be around them when it's that time of year for them. They can be very aggressive. I was trying to tell the people behind my house who were like taking pictures and thinking it was fun and had their dog there. I'm like, do you like your dog? Because I guarantee you that thing with the horns doesn't. Okay, so yeah, you want to steer clear of them. But they're also gonna, you know, have times of the year if you know you've got a doe that is pregnant, she's gonna need to eat more. Okay, so things like that can affect how much grazing is gonna want. If you're a plant, okay, that can affect you. So light triggers a lot of things. Sometimes it might even trigger the thing that normally eats you to take off and migrate. That's good for you. Okay, stuff like that. So light's a big one, and it's not just about energy, it's about all of the signals and things like that that it can cause. Okay, wind, okay, we were talking about wind. Wind not only affects that thigmotropism thing, but it also makes wind chill. Plants experience that, okay, in the same way that we do. The reason we get the feeling that it's colder outside than it actually is, that wind chill factor, that has to do with how quickly moisture evaporates from your skin. When moisture evaporates from your skin, that takes energy. That's why sweat works the way it does. Okay, if we get hot, we sweat. Okay, when that sweat evaporates, it takes energy from our body to do it. That's what makes us cooler. We'll actually learn about that more in Unit 4. Okay, but in terms of wind chill, okay, you know in the wintertime your skin is always a bit drier. Okay, well wind chill is that cold, dry wind blowing across your skin, stealing your moisture. Okay, and when that moisture evaporates, you feel colder. So it's not that it is minus 40 out, it might only be minus 25, but the wind is making it feel colder than that because of the effect of you're losing moisture to the air. That's wind chill. It can happen to plants too. Okay? And of course, the faster the wind is blowing, the quicker things dry out. Okay? This was the observation that resulted in the invention of the hairdryer. Okay? I mean, a hairdryer is not only hot air, it's also moving air. Okay? You wouldn't just hold a heat element next to your head. Okay? That is not gonna, I mean, your hair will dry, okay? But it works a lot better if the air is moving and you're, brushing it and exposing different parts of it. Okay? I don't know, it's a vicarious experience for me. I hear friends tell me, okay, that's how it works. But yeah, you're getting that circulation, things dry out faster on a windy day. I mean, think about when we have a Chinook, right? Not only does the snow melt, but the water dries up really quick too. The faster the wind is going, the faster things will dry out. Okay, I was telling you about those crummels trees. Okay, a little while ago, the ones that bend like this. Okay, this is a whole kind of patch of them, and they're all just kind of bent around like that. And you can see that their trunks are completely exposed on the side the wind comes from. Okay, all the branches are enclosed in behind. Okay, in the wintertime, this would just be a big snowdrift. All right. Okay, rocks and soil. How thick is the soil you're growing in? How deep is the soil you're growing in? What is the soil made out of? All of those things can affect how much nutrients will be available, how well that soil retains moisture. Okay, all of that stuff is important. Okay, so there's stuff growing here, but it's like just kind of spindly looking grass and a few little things growing along. Okay, would you consider that to be really fertile soil? Okay, why not? What else do you see right at the surface? Rocks. Okay, that tells you that the soil's not very deep. Shallow soil, like this deep, because when I took this picture, I actually had to put a rock behind the trowel to hold it up. I couldn't push it into the dirt and have it stand up on its own because there was nothing but rocks. Okay, so the soil only existed in areas between the rocks. Okay, where it could collect, where it would wash in when there's a rainstorm or where wind would cause it to settle. Okay, there wasn't a lot of soil there. That's why you don't see any big trees. There's nothing for them to put their roots in and anchor. Okay, so depth of soil, what it's made out of. Around here, our soils are pretty sandy because our bedrock is sandstone. Okay, sandy soils don't retain moisture very well. Right? If you go a little further north, okay, the soils are a lot more loamy. They come from more of limestone and things like that. They hold water better than the soil here. So it's not just how much soil you have, it's also what it's made out of. I mean, if you dig a hole in the backyard and compare it to a bag of potting soil, they look a lot different. Okay? All right. Now, periodic disturbances is one we didn't mention. What happened here? Fire. Yeah, there's a forest fire. Those are pretty common. Okay, they have a very negative connotation because obviously they're highly destructive, but they're also a really important part of cycling the nutrients. Okay, you don't generally get a fire in a young forest because a young forest has got a lot of green, leafy parts to it. Okay, but you do get it in an old growth forest, and we have lots of that. Okay, when you go into the mountains, all of that forest is old. Okay, so some of it is standing deadfall, it's more dry. Okay, but when it burns, the nutrients can go back into the soil. All that ash is holding some of the nutrients. Okay, it also changes the availability of other resources. Okay, if you were trying to grow when these plants were alive, and you were down here on the ground and you were little, how good a chance do you have? That's like putting a 6-year-old, on the ice with NHL players. Okay, they don't stand much of a chance. These are bigger, they're fully grown, they're mature, they know what they're doing. Okay, if you're little, you don't stand a chance. Could you grow now? Absolutely. These trees are dead. They can't steal the water. And most of the stuff that would have caused shade is gone, so more light will get to the ground. They still provide protection from wind and stuff like that. Okay? This is actually the natural cycle of succession. Okay? Those spruce trees, they don't release their seeds until the cones are burnt. Okay? Lots of pine trees and spruce trees will have cones that don't open until they're exposed to high heat. Because why let your seeds grow in the same place you're already growing? Then you're competing with each other. Okay? But after a fire cracks these things open and releases the seeds, perfect environment for them to grow. Okay? It's actually why plants don't do well in clear cuts. Okay? If you've ever seen what clear cut logging looks like, and then they plant the little trees, only about half of those trees will live. They're not meant to grow in the direct sunlight without the shade of their dead folks in the way. Okay? So they actually don't do it well. Okay, we'll finish that up tomorrow, and we're going to do our unit exam review tomorrow. Okay? We're going to start physics on Thursday.